Alright guys, so I know macro photography is more popular than ever, but macro lenses aren't getting any cheaper. They're fairly expensive, and it's difficult to justify buying one if you don't know that you're going to delve further into the field. So here's what I did. I purchased these $10 extension tubes from eBay. Okay, I bought them from a Chinese seller, a random Chinese seller. I'll put the links in the description. But basically, you go to eBay and you search for Nikon extension tubes or Canon extension tubes, and then you sort by price ascending, and you just buy the cheap ones from a top-rated seller and hope for the best. They come as a set. Okay, so you'll notice there's quite a lot going on here. Two of these pieces are the attachments. So one attaches to the lens, one attaches to your camera. It's a camera mount. So you got to buy the right extension tubes for your camera mount. Okay, and then the actual extension tubes are here. So they're labeled 1, 2, and 3. This one's 9mm in length. This one's 16mm, and this one's 30mm. What are extension tubes and how do they work? Okay, so just really quickly, I'm going to put up on the screen examples of what these $10 extension tubes can do. And as you can see, it's actually possible to get decent macro results, and we only spent 10 bucks. They're very aptly named. They simply extend the distance that your lens sits from your camera sensor. Okay, and the further away it sits, the higher the magnification ratio becomes of this new lens that we've invented here. Okay, and the way you calculate the new magnification ratio, if you're so inclined, is as follows. So for example, if your lens has a natural magnification ratio of 0.2x, and you want to calculate your new magnification ratio with the extension tubes, you simply take the millimeters that you used for the extension tube. So let's say we're using just tube number 3, which is 30mm. We divide that by the focal length, and it becomes 0.6. Right? We add that to 0.2 and it becomes 0.8x. So you're getting a fairly decent magnification. When I used 30mm in the example, I was referring to this fat extension tube here. There's nothing stopping you from using more than one of them in combination. You just screw them onto each other and you can stack them for maximum effect. Now I find with these extension tubes, a little goes a long way. So I typically start with just the little one, the 9mm one, and then if I need more magnification, maybe I add this other one, and then maybe I add this one. But really, you can probably get your desired results if you're doing like indoor stuff, just taking pictures of stuff around the house. This guy, or maybe the two of them together, may be all you need. Well, on the positive side, they're very cheap, as we've mentioned. Now, they're not all created equal. These are the absolute cheapest ones. They do not have any electrical contacts anywhere on these tubes, so your camera will not be able to communicate with the lens. You may find that you would like more capability, more quality in your extension tubes, and for that you should go with like a third-party extension tube company like Kenko. They're very popular. Now they're also OEM, original manufacturer extension tubes. They're a bit more expensive. I'm not sure if they offer enough to justify the price over the Kenkos, for example, but that's another possibility. The other good thing is because they are just hollow tubes, okay, nothing inside them, they cannot by themselves reduce the image quality of the lens. Okay, so whatever optical quality you had is the optical quality you're going to get. Now there's some downsides with placing your lens further away from the sensor like this, but by themselves they will not degrade the image quality. Another good thing is they can be used with just about any cheap kit lens. Here I'm using it with like the cheapest lens I could think of, the Nikon 28 to 80mm, which costs 40 bucks or less. I have a review on this lens. But if you have a kit lens, like a basic kit lens, no problem. If you have a nifty 50, no problem. So cheap lenses work great with these extension tubes. In fact, these tubes may work better with a nifty 50 than with an expensive pro zoom like a 24 to 70. One of the obvious downsides with these extension tubes, these particular ones here, is you do get what you pay for. They were $10, and right off the bat I noticed there's already some slight mechanical issues here. Nothing that prevents me from actually using these tubes, but I can tell the quality isn't quite there. So for $10 I'm not complaining, but don't expect a precision engineered product here. This particular latch here has been giving me issues lately. Now, the obvious downside to using extension tubes over macro is by placing the lens further away from the camera sensor, you greatly limit the amount of light hitting the sensor. Okay, so to compensate for that, you're going to need to increase your shutter speed. You know, for longer and longer exposures, you're going to pretty much have to use these with a tripod. Okay, and taking pictures of still subjects, still macro subjects at home with a tripod, that's how I would use these extension tubes. Now, these really cheap ones, as I said, have no electrical contacts, so you're going to have to set the aperture manually on your lens. And you'll notice right away, lenses like this do not have a physical aperture ring. So this becomes a problem. So how do you actually set your aperture if there's no aperture ring on the lens? And this is what the whole contraption looks like. Okay, so you can still use the lens just fine, except the lens will not autofocus anymore because it's not talking to the camera. So you're going to have to use manual focus. And the aperture, when you turn the camera on, it says f0 because it has no idea what the aperture is. Okay, your camera may have some workarounds. For example, on Nikon, if you can set the aperture while the lens is still on the camera and hold down the depth of field preview button, take the lens off, and then reattach the lens with the extension tubes while holding down the button, you can keep the aperture to where you want it. Now, aperture is very important to set because you want to have your aperture at a really high number or really narrow f-stop. For example, f10, f11. I personally shoot with extension tubes at f16. And once again, that brings us back to some of the downsides, right? That really limits the amount of light coming in. So the tripod work is critical. And because you can only manual focus with this lens, pretty much have to use this with live view. Now, a downside to using extension tubes in general is that if you try to use it at wider apertures, like let's say f4, f2.8, something like that, you're going to get heavy vignetting around the edges of the frame. So that's why people say always stop it down. Oh yeah, and one more thing, you cannot focus to infinity when you're using extension tubes. So as I said, it's a good idea to use these on a tripod in live view. It's all going to depend on how comfortable you are with your camera's live view system. It certainly helps to have a live view system in the first place. So here we are. I've placed this headlamp on this table fairly close to us, and I'm putting the camera right up to it. You'll notice that we're able to easily focus on this headlamp, and it's like literally propped up right against this lens, and this lens is not supposed to focus anything close to this point. And we can zoom in with live view and fine-tune our focus manually. So I'm just doing it with my hands right now. Usually I'd be doing it on a tripod right here. Okay, so that's a good amount. And you have to be very careful here. Do not move the camera because the focal plane becomes very narrow. So keep it on a tripod. Try not to move the camera at all. If you want to focus stack, it's a really great idea with extension tubes because the plane of focus is going to be so narrow. You may want to first focus, for example, on the bottom part of the image, then the middle part, and then the background component, and then focus stack them later in a tool like Photoshop or Affinity Photo, something like that. A lot of image editors give you that option. I guys want to quickly finish by showing you some images that I've gotten using these $10 extension tubes. First, we have the image that was the best I could do with a cheap zoom lens without the extension tubes, and then you can see what it looks like with the extension tubes. I was also able to get a really nice image of this watch that I'm putting together. I have assembled a watch from eBay parts, and the face of the watch is made from actual meteorite. Yes, and I really wanted to show off this watch to some people I know, so with these extension tubes I was able to start doing some watch photography. Now, watch photography is actually very tricky, and as you can tell, I'm pretty horrible at it because it really is a matter of putting in the effort to cut out the reflections. So it's probably a good idea to get a basic light box going. I didn't have one available, so reflections were an issue. But as I said, guys, for $10 we can't really complain. And if you want to try out macro and you have a cheap kit zoom or a cheap nifty 50 and you don't want to blow this hundreds of dollars on a macro lens, consider buying some of these tubes. Maybe get the Kenko ones, just so you don't have to struggle as much with cheap build quality and lack of electrical contacts in these $10 ones. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you guys next time.